Imagine you're 19 years old. Yesterday, you were laughing with your friends, making plans for the future. Maybe you wanted to become a teacher, a doctor, or simply take over your father's farm one day. Life was simple, predictable, and full of possibilities. Today, everything has changed. You're standing on a crowded train platform, wearing a military uniform that still feels unfamiliar. Your mother is trying not to cry. Your father gives you one last handshake, stronger than usual, because he doesn't trust himself to say goodbye. Around you, thousands of people wave flags and cheer as marching bands play patriotic songs. Everyone says the same thing. Don't worry, you'll be home before Christmas. You believe them. Almost everyone does. But none of you knows that you're about to step into one of the darkest chapters in human history. This is the story of World War I, a war that lasted more than 4 years, killed millions of people, destroyed ancient empires, introduced terrifying new weapons, and changed the world forever. But every story has a beginning, and this one starts long before the first bullet was fired. Europe in 1914 looked like the center of civilization. Great cities were growing faster than ever. Railroads connected countries. Electricity illuminated streets at night. Factories produced goods on an unimaginable scale. Scientists were making discoveries that seemed almost magical. It felt like humanity had entered a brand new age. Yet beneath all that progress, something dangerous was growing. Europe wasn't truly at peace. It was simply waiting. Like a forest during a hot summer, silent but ready to burst into flames from a single spark. Every powerful nation wanted to become even stronger. Germany was expanding its army and building powerful battleships. Britain ruled the oceans with the largest navy in the world and had no intention of giving up that position. France still remembered the humiliation of losing territory to Germany decades earlier and dreamed of revenge. Russia wanted more influence in Eastern Europe, while Austria-Hungary struggled to keep together an empire made up of many different cultures and nationalities. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire, once one of the greatest powers on earth, was slowly losing its strength. Europe had become a continent full of nervous neighbors watching each other with suspicion. Every time one nation built a bigger army, another answered by building an even bigger one. Every new battleship inspired another. Every military parade encouraged another country to hold an even larger parade. Ironically, everyone claimed they were preparing for peace while spending enormous amounts of money preparing for war. To make matters even more complicated, Europe was divided into two rival alliances. Britain, France, and Russia stood together. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy formed another alliance, although Italy would later change sides. These agreements were supposed to prevent conflict by discouraging attacks. Instead, they guaranteed that if one nation entered a war, its allies would be dragged in as well. Europe had become a giant row of dominoes. All it needed was one small push. That push came on June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, arrived in Sarajevo with his wife, Sophie. The visit was meant to be a political event, nothing more. Earlier that morning, one assassin threw a bomb at the Archduke's car. He missed. Most people would have cancelled the rest of the trip immediately. Instead, the visit continued. Hours later, after the driver made a wrong turn and stopped to reverse the car, fate stepped in. Standing just a few meters away was a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The very man he had failed to reach earlier was suddenly right in front of him. Princip didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, raised his pistol, and fired 2 shots. Within minutes, Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were dead. 2 bullets, 2 victims. Yet those shots echoed far beyond the streets of Sarajevo. They echoed across an entire continent. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and declared war. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Germany promised full support to Austria-Hungary. France prepared to support Russia. Germany invaded Belgium to reach France quickly, believing speed would guarantee victory. Instead, Britain entered the war to defend Belgium's neutrality. Within weeks, Europe was no longer arguing. It was burning. Germany believed the war would end within months. Instead, Europe disappeared beneath an endless network of trenches stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. What began as temporary shelters became home for millions of soldiers. Imagine living in a narrow ditch filled with mud, surrounded by rats, lice, and the constant smell of smoke and death. Rain flooded the trenches until men stood for hours in freezing water. Sleep was rare. Safety was an illusion. Every morning, soldiers prepared for another attack. A whistle blew. They climbed out of the trench and charged across no man's land. Waiting for them were machine guns capable of firing hundreds of rounds every minute. Entire waves of soldiers vanished within moments. Sometimes thousands died just to gain a few hundred meters of ground, only to lose it again days later. The war had become a brutal stalemate where victory seemed impossible. Then came poison gas. Soldiers watched strange clouds drift toward them before realizing the danger. Their eyes burned, their lungs filled with pain, and every breath became a desperate struggle. Gas masks helped, but early versions were unreliable. Modern warfare had reached a terrifying new level. Yet even in the middle of hell, humanity refused to disappear. On Christmas Eve in 1914, parts of the Western Front fell silent. German and British soldiers climbed out of their trenches, exchanged gifts, shared food, sang Christmas songs, and even played football together. For a few unforgettable hours, enemies became ordinary young men again. The next day, the war continued. The conflict soon spread far beyond Western Europe. The Ottoman Empire joined Germany and Austria-Hungary, opening new fronts across the Middle East and Gallipoli. Allied forces hoped to capture the Dardanelles, but fierce Ottoman resistance turned the campaign into a costly failure. Gallipoli became a defining moment for Turkey, Australia, and New Zealand, where the courage of those soldiers is still remembered today. Meanwhile, battles like Verdun and the Somme showed just how deadly the war had become. Hundreds of thousands were killed or wounded, often for only a few kilometers of land. Victory came at such a terrible cost that many wondered if anyone was truly winning. Away from the front lines, civilians fought their own battle. Food shortages spread across Europe, while millions of women entered factories to build weapons, ammunition, and military equipment. Entire societies had become part of the war effort. In 1917, everything changed again. Germany's submarines attacked ships crossing the Atlantic, and the Zimmermann telegram pushed the United States into the war. Fresh American troops, powerful industries, and enormous resources gave the Allies the advantage they desperately needed. Germany launched one final offensive in 1918, hoping to win before American forces arrived in full strength. At first, the attack succeeded, but exhausted soldiers, shrunken supplies, and determined Allied resistance stopped the advance. Soon, Germany's allies surrendered one after another. Hunger, protests, and revolution spread across Germany. The Kaiser stepped down, and peace negotiations began. Then, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. The Great War was over. Around 20 million people had lost their lives. Millions more returned home carrying wounds that would never heal. Entire generations had disappeared. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles officially ended the war. Germany accepted blame, lost territory, reduced its military, and faced enormous reparations. Many believed these harsh conditions would guarantee peace. Instead, they created anger and instability that helped pave the way for an even greater disaster. Just 20 years later, the world would be at war again. World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. Tragically, it wasn't. It was only the beginning. More than a century has passed, but its legacy remains everywhere. Empires collapsed. New nations were born. Technology advanced at incredible speed. Yet the greatest lesson was never about weapons or politics. It was about people. Millions of ordinary people whose dreams ended in muddy trenches far from home. Every photograph from the Great War tells the same silent story. Behind every uniform was a son, a brother, a husband, a friend. History remembers the battles, but we should never forget the people who fought them, because peace is far more fragile than it appears.